Wow, we are live now. Thank God. Um, Another introduction. Let's do this again. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Power Platform User Group Nigeria technical session, and we are glad to have you with us. Just in case you've not been able to go over our previous sessions, they are live on our YouTube channel. You can go over them to be able to get up to speed on some things that you may have missed. Thank you again for joining us. Today we have Olautan Ibrahim Ayomide, who is going to be taking us through Power Apps um, optimization and some effective tips, essentially. So, Olautan Ibrahim, sorry if I jumble your name.
Nah, it's fine.
He's
It's
a
fine.
platform
Thank you.
developer who's essentially going to be taking us through today. I'm going to hand it over to him now. Ibrahim, good afternoon. You can start.
Good afternoon, Mayowa. Thank you. So basically, I'll dive right into the topic. So basically, we'll be looking at optimization tips and best practices for building Power Apps, right? So these are tips for building efficient and effective applications. So whether you are a novice developer or an experienced developer, these are tips that will help you to build robust applications, you know, that will deliver, that will have seamless, that give users seamless user experiences while giving them, the optimum, how will I put it, the optimum performance. So basically, what do we mean when we say we're optimizing an application, we are building you want to optimize a Power App, right? So basically, this implies enhancing the performance and the efficiency by improving the data loading, minimizing the controls within the applications. Because when we say improving the data loading, the controls within applications, when you have a lot of controls, then it's going to take longer to load. So you minimize the controls, you simplify the logic that you're using within your application so that it can work more efficiently. Then it's also important that you have responsive design, you understand, because uh, irrespective of the functionality within an application, it all comes down to if users can interact successfully with that application. If users cannot interact successfully with an application, it's going to undermine all your efforts that you have put into developing that application, because that is the main essence, so that users can use it and they can achieve the goals for which the application has been developed. So responsive design is important as well when you are optimizing, is an important aspect of optimizing your Power App application. So
Sorry to
and
cut
all
you short,
this,
Ibrahim. Sorry to cut you short. Do you mind probably sharing your screen so we can follow through if you have a slide?
okay, okay. Oh, sorry, I just have like a rough sketch,
Yeah,
rough sketch
it's not.
word file.
It's not really a problem. You can go on ahead probably when you want to demo or show us some things. You can now share your screen. That's fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. So just follow along. I would share the file with everyone after the session so that you can also go through it as well again and familiarize yourself well with the contents and everything. So just bear with me for now. I'll just follow along with me. Right. So basically, all these when we put them together, it's going to result in a faster, more reliable and user-friendly, application that is going to give users the optimum experience when they are using the application. They'll get the best from the application, right? So now, first, if I'm to tell anybody that okay, optimize an application or make an application better, you ask the question why should I optimize it? Why should I bother? So why does optimization matters, right? For performance, first is for performance, right? So when you open, I'm sure many of us have used applications before. When we opened it and it took probably like 15 seconds to load, then you lamented bitterly that wow, this application is bad, the experience is not good. So the performance in an application is very important, right? So when you optimize an application, it loads faster, you have quicker responses. You click on the button, it responds to you immediately. You don't wait 5 seconds to get a response for the action that you just did. So it enhances the user experience, performance is better. So also we have resource efficiency, right? Apart from the the effect it has on the user due to the performance, also the effect it has on your machine, you get on your computer. If your application is not well optimized, then they will utilize a high percentage of your memory, your CPU, you know, even down to your network. Imagine you are running a workflow that is sending unnecessary amount, a very large unnecessary amount of API calls, which can be optimized in such a way that you just need to probably collect the whole data in a collection, and you only reference the collection when you need that particular information. So in that kind of scenario, now you're using a lot of, you're sending a lot of API calls, which you actually don't need to send, you understand, which you could have done in a easier and better way. So also scalability, when you talk about scalability, this has to do with a large amount of users and data in the system. So basically, well-optimized applications can handle larger number of users and data without reducing the performance of the application. And you remember, the performance is the first thing I spoke about when I was speaking about reason why optimization matters. So when in applications that are not well optimized, by the time the application starts growing and the users, you start having a large amount of users on the system, and the data starts growing to a very large amount, then you see that the performance of that system, of that application, starts decreasing. You may start experiencing lag, and the performance generally will reduce. So if the application is well optimized, right, the performance will be optimum irrespective of whether of how the app is growing, the users and the data on the app is growing, performance is going to remain optimum. So also we have cost reduction, right? I've had scenarios where I was building applications, right, and we had to we had to incorporate a kind of functionality where I had to generate a PDF, right? I had to generate a PDF from the data that was coming from the database being used. So we had crossroad. We had to take either one of two methods. It's either I use how would I put it, a premium functionality, right, to achieve that, or I find a way to develop a custom, means to achieve that. So basically, I found a way. Then I used HTML, right? I composed the structure of the message and everything in HTML, which I sent and I converted to a PDF, right? So basically, if you can find a way to, optimize your applications, the way you can reduce costs, right? It's going to reduce cost. And also, apart from even that, that is, by the way, in terms of if you can reduce your resource consumption, right? You can reduce your consumption. That is going to reduce cost a lot. So reliability and stability, right? When you talk about reliability and stability, optimized applications, they are very less likely to crash because you have put a lot of effort to ensure that everything works. You've optimized it. You are ensuring that everything is working at the maximum capacity in which they can work. Your formulas are well structured. Whatever resource you are putting inside, maybe how will I put it? Maybe images or whatever you are, adding them the best way possible. Get so your app is less likely to crash or to encounter errors because um, effort has been put into making sure that errors are mitigated. So also we have maintenance. When you optimize your application, it simplifies updates and reduce the risk of bugs and enhancements, just like in terms of reliability. So your app is well optimized, you have lesser bugs, and you even need to perform lesser enhancements because the app is well structured and well built. So we also have security. In terms of security, everything we've been saying all boils down to the fact that you want you are building a very, very solid app. you're taking all the steps, yeah, putting everything in place to ensure that this app is well structured, well built. So also down to the security you will have you have taken measures to ensure that you get the app is is well secured, and there are little or no security breaches on the application. So the security is going to be airtight when you perform due diligence and optimize your applications. So what are the key factors? What are the key factors, right, that affect app performance, that that can decrease the performance of your applications, make your applications not function as expected, or not up to optimum capacity, right? So we have data loading. Right? In terms of data loading, the way you load your data within your application is, especially when you're dealing with a large amount of applications that deal with large amount of data, right? This can really impact your app performance. So if the application is not properly being loaded into the application, this can cause your application to drag. You can reduce performance of your application. Okay, so you also have number of controls. When too much controls are being used within your application, you have too much controls. So in the past, when I just started building applications, I had instances where I was building there was a kind of emphasis. The receivers had kind of emphasis on a application in which they want everything to be on just a single page. Everything happening in the application should be on just a single page. They don't want to move to any page, just everything on the page. So by the time I implemented everything, I noticed that I was having around 3,000 something controls on just a single page, and that was a serious issue. So really, rather, if not just on a single page, your whole application, you want to minimize the number of controls that you're using, right? So we have formula and logic. So that's another factor that's affecting our performance, right? Formula and logic. So in this regard, you want to write your formulas in the most efficient way possible, right? The most efficient way possible, especially when you start dealing with databases, when you want to pull data, you want to filter the data, you want to structure the data you're bringing in, you want to do all sorts of manipulations on the data from the database. You want to ensure that you are doing this in the most efficient way possible in order to achieve optimum results, and also in some instances so that you get your up to date data, so you don't get you still get down to that. There's something called delegation in some instances. If your formulas are not well structured, you may end up in a kind of scenario in which you won't get you won't get all the data which you're supposed to get. Some of the data will not be fetched because you are breaching delegation limits. So also we have data connection. So using direct, so Power Apps by default, and amazingly, Power Apps provide us with a very large amount of out-of-the-box connectors, right? So when you leverage this gives you an edge. You can easily collect data, and you can easily collect data. We have those data connections in place already, which you can leverage, and you can use that within your applications. So we also have network usage. So in this regard, minimizing your data transfer over the network, and implementing cache. When I say minimizing your data transfer over the network, I spoke about this a bit earlier when I said you should, in terms of, let's say there's a particular data, probably master data, which you are using within your application, which is static, right? This data does not change. Rather than doing a lookup to the table every time you need to query something or check something or use the data, rather than doing a lookup to the data source, right, to pull that data, what you can rather do, another efficient way is that you collect that data within a local collection within your application, right? So that when you need to use this data, all you have to do is just reference that local connection, and that is faster. You don't need to do an extra API call down to the data source to pull that data, so that is way better. So we also have app design, which I also spoke about. This in terms of how it affects our performance. If your app design is bad, if the navigation is not well defined, the users are finding it difficult to operate your application, to navigate from screen to screen, to find their way around within your application, it's going to affect the overall performance. They won't have a good view or a good they won't have a good experience using the application, and this will affect the overall performance. So we also have resource management, and this have to do with the effects when you are making when your application is not well optimized. It's going to impact the CPU, the memory of your machine. You understand? So it's going to be running too much. How will I put it? It's going to be running too. It's going to be making too much calls, running too much data calls. So basically, it is going to affect your CPU usage and stuff like that. So you want all these are stuff points that um, you want to watch out for when you are building your applications. These are points that can impact the performance of your application, impact how users will see your application, which is the main thing when it comes to applications you're building, because you're building this application for some people to use it, and they have to have a good outlook on the application, have a good experience when they're using the application for the application to actually be a successful application that you've developed. So basically, I'm going to move on to the next points in on the next point, which is actually data source optimization. So basically, we've looked at what is optimization, why should I optimize my app, what are the factors that can impact the performance of my app. So now we are going to pick the nitty-gritty of application development and look at how we can optimize this. So basically now I'm going to pick the data source first, because data source is like the basis. This is where our data comes from. This is where we submit it to. This is the data that we interact with within our application. So when you want to optimize your data sources within your Power Apps, what are you to look out for, right? So the first thing you have to look out for, or you have to consider, is the data volume. So when speaking of the data volume, right, the data volume is the amount of data that this application that you want to build is going to be taking, or the how will I put it, the when you are building something, you can foresee or say, okay, this application I'm building is going to grow at this pace. The data that will be within the application is going to grow at this pace. So okay, will it be handling a very large amount of data, or will it just be just a little amount of data? You can foresee how the data will grow. So based on this, the data volume, you have to ensure that the data source can handle the data volume. So you just don't select any data source based on what, although the availability of data source you have available and at hand also goes a long way, but still you have to consider the data volume of the application before you select your data source. So data sources like Database, SQL, they are very robust, so they are very scalable. When you have very large data coming in, you can use these data sources. They are very fantastic data sources. When you have large data volumes within the application is going to accommodate a very large data volume. So we also have to take delegation into place, right? So delegation basically is when you say delegate, normal English, you say you are delegating something, that means you are shifting the responsibility for the conduction of a particular task. You are shifting it to something. So when you say delegation in terms of data sources, that means you are shifting the conduction of the query to the data source. You're shifting it to the data source side, so that when you conduct a query, the query is conducted on the data source side, then the results are returned back to you within the application. So that is delegation. So when you are choosing a data source, you have to take into consideration the delegation limits of that data source. What are the delegation limits? So every data source have delegable functions that you can use with them. You have to consider this. So delegable functions are functions that allow you to actually delegate queries to the data source to perform before sending the data back into your Power App. So also connectivity, you have to take into consideration how reliable the connectivity of the data sources. Okay, so that you won't get so that you know that there's steady access to the data which is being saved. You don't want your users to be cut off at any point in time. So there's steady connection to the data source. So we have security. So security is a very big thing to consider when you are optimizing your data sources, because we don't want data breaches. We don't want data getting into the wrong hands. We want optimum security when you are creating, when you are selecting the data sources that you want to use within your application, right? So you have to evaluate the security features of the data sources and ensure that they are in line with the features within your application. So we also have scalability. Scalability, like I had talked about before, have to do with accommodation of large data and users within your application. So the data source you are going to be selecting for your application need to be scalable in terms, need to be scalable enough to handle the users, the foreseeable users and data that is going to be accommodated within the application, right? So we also have licensing and costs, which is very important as well. So licensing and costs go a long way when selecting your database. So based on your capacity, so basically, if we are to look at it now, we have different data sources, right? We have SharePoint, which officially it comes with your Microsoft 365 subscription. So basically, most users in Nigeria, most companies tend to use SharePoint because it is they feel it's practically free. So basically, we have SharePoint. We also have Database, which is a premium data source. You have to pay for that. So based on this, you have to consider your options to determine the data source that will be used for your application. So now going down, in terms of data source optimization, another important aspect that needs to be considered is when we are using our data source. After you must have selected your data source, right? You want to fetch data, submit data to your data source. So in terms of fetching data, you have to look at filtering and delegation. That is very important in terms of optimization for your application. So what is filtering? Filtering, I guess we all know this. This is basically narrowing down the data within your data source to specific information that you want to see within your application, right? So basically, you filter the data source down to the information you want to see within your application. So now, when you are filtering now, we then come to encounter the thing called delegation. So delegation is, like I said, is the offloading of data processing tasks to the data source. Just like what I said before, the query, you're leaving the data source to perform the query, right? Then return the information back to your Power App. So instead of processing the data set within your Power Apps, you get to process it within the data source, and the data is returned. And the reason why this is usually preferable is because Power App generally has a feature called the data row limit. So the data row limit by default is 500, and the data row limit means the amount of information that Power Apps can pull in from the data source on its own. So basically, if you are leaving Power Apps, if you are allowing Power Apps to perform to process the data set, if you are processing your data set within Power Apps, it's only going to be processing or performing the query based on your data row limit. So if your data row limit is 500 and you are running a query from within your Power Apps that is a non-delegable query, then I'll be running that query on just the data that is contained within your data row limit. So that is by default 500, and you can expand that to a maximum of, I think, 2000. So basically, that's why it's preferable you perform delegable queries so that you can get all your up-to-date data, everything, when you perform your query, right? So now you have delegable functions, and you have delegable functions that you can use for each data source. So depending on the data source that is being selected, you have to check what functions are delegable for this data source and leverage those functions when you are structuring your queries, your filter queries within your Power App, so that you ensure that you are fetching complete and up-to-date data from your Power Apps every time that the user uses the Power your app. So that is very, 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 very important. And what are the best practices when you are creating your filter queries on Power Apps? So it's usually good practice to combine delegate queries, right? So basically, I want to do a very deep drill into my data to get more specific data. So I can combine two, three delegable queries, right? To get down to that particular data that I need within my Power App. So you can combine delegable queries together to get to drill down through your data appropriately. So also we can also test and monitor. So actually, when after creating your queries, it's usually good to test and monitor the performance of your filter queries and conditions to ensure that they are working optimally. You understand? Because there are updates in Power Apps every now and then. So you have to just check and check, double check to make sure that everything is working as expected. So stay updated. So that's very important, especially when Power Apps everything is changing every day. So now another aspect we have is actually managing large data sets efficiently. Because when we have large data sets that we are querying from our apps, it's usually a challenge to manage these data sets because uh, you have to do this in such a way that it's not going to affect your app performance because large data sets means a lot of data coming into your application, and naturally that will slow down the performance of your application. So you have to take steps to ensure that although we have this large data set, but it's not impacting the performance of my app. My app is performing optimally, and users can also still do everything that they need to do within the application, access any part of the data that they need to access, without uh, compromising app performance. So what do we need to watch out for when we are managing large data sets within our application, right? So first, use delegation. Because if you don't use delegation, then users may start reporting that they cannot see the complete data. They are not seeing recent data, or they are not seeing some particular old data that have been submitted earlier on, depending on the way you structure your filter query. So they might be lost. You may not see all the data that is existing within your database, within your application, if your queries are not you are not using delegable functions within your filter queries in your application. So the users your users may not see all the data that exists within your database. Also, there's when you are dealing with large data sets in Power Apps, it's usually very advisable that you load data incrementally. What does this imply? It means that you don't bring all your data within Power App at the same time. You just don't bombard the app with the 10,000 records you have within your SharePoint list. You don't do that because doing that is going to seriously reduce the performance of your application. Your application will be extremely slow to track, and your users will not be happy. So what you can do in this instance is you can bring your data into your application in chunks as required. If a user wants to drill down to a particular record, probably you have like an ID field, you can use this to just give the user the functionality to filter down to that particular record with the ID, pick that particular record, or you have a date field, a date range functionality that you've incorporated in your filter so that your users can use that date range to drill down the data, or you can even do that in such a way that the data loads in an incremental pattern of probably 100 records. So you load the first 100 record, then you load the next 100 records, then as you go. So you move like that. So basically, you just don't bring the whole data into your Power Apps. You do this incrementally. You bring it chunks. So also you optimize your data queries. So you have to create your data queries. Yeah, they have to be optimized. You have to make sure that they are well structured, and like I said, your delegation is 100%, so that and you watch how you like I said, structure. When you structure your filter queries, they have to be structured appropriately so that you can you can get the most optimum performance. Okay, so also when you're using large data structures, you can catch, use collections for local catching so that you are not doing a filter. You already have this large database within your application, which a very large database which you are trying to manage. So we have a couple of other little databases which we are also using for different things within our application. What you can just do is that those little databases, right? You can just catch them locally within your application. Probably, I will not advise you do that on your own start. Probably you can just do that on your. We have this feature called named formulas within our apps. So you can just create named formulas for these static data that you have within those databases. So you just collect all of them there, and you can reference those named formulas to reference the values within those tables within your Power Apps, so that you don't have to do calls again to those tables to fetch those data. So you already have that locally within your cached within your Power Apps, so that you know that okay, henceforth it's just that major table that we are, depending on the functionalities you want within your app, we know it's just that major giant table that we want to be querying from our app exports. The rest are local data. So we also have, you can also, when you're using large data sets within your application, you have to also monitor and adjust performance. So even though you have the optimum setup, filters, everything, your queries, everything is optimum, you also have to still monitor it from time to time to see if there's any drop in the performance, you understand? So that okay, if there's a drop, you can investigate and see what's going on. Is there any changes? Has there been any updates? So that you can keep your app up to, you can keep it optimal always at all times. So now, moving down, I'm going to move down to the next section, which is formula optimization. So in formula optimization now, like I've been saying, I've been hammering on writing, structuring your formulas, using delegations, all these I've been speaking about all these. So but now we get to actually look at what do we mean when we are talking about formula optimization. What exactly are we talking about? So now, how do we optimize our formula so that we get the best user experience? So first is that we simplify complex formulas, right? We break down your formulas into smaller parts, and where necessary, use variables, your catch data you get within your formulas, so that it's not every time that you're making calls to get data, reduce your data calls. So also use delegation. This delegation comes out everywhere. So use delegation. We ensure your data processing is handled by the data source rather than within your application. So avoid repetitive calculation. So this now, that named formulas that I mentioned earlier comes up again. So avoid repetitive calculations within your application. You can just create a named formula for a particular calculation that you need. Let me try to look for a particular scenario for you that I can use to explain this. So um, I was building an app recently in which we have a kind of scenario where we have fonts, right? We have fonts, and these fonts are being used all over my app. Imagine I have several pages. I have, sorry, not fonts, font sizes. So it's a responsive application. So the app, based on your screen size, increases, enlarges. So basically, when it reduces, I want the font size to reduce to something that is compatible with the available space, right? So, and this is something I'm going to be using throughout my app. So I don't want to be setting these values throughout my app. So what is done is that I have in my name formulas, I have a font size, um, formula, right? In which I have specified all the sizes of all the fonts for when the screen size is small, when the screen size is large. I've specified everything there. So basically, all I have to do now is just reference that single formula that I have in my named formula everywhere within my app. So if I want to make changes, all I need to do is make changes on that single named formula, and it's going to reflect throughout my application, right? So basically, apologies, please give me a minute, please.
No problem. Hope everyone is Oh, everyone is following through how to optimize your Power Apps using name formulas, collection, optimizing your data from the data source itself. Yeah, so just give you Brian a few minutes. And you can begin to ask a question in the chat box. Time is flying by fast, so Brian can answer that when we get to the question and answer section. Okay, Brian, you can go ahead.
Yeah, apologies for the interruption. So,
No
like I
problem.
was saying, avoid repetitive calculations. You can use named formulas, and you understand. So you can reference that named formulas anywhere within your application. So you can also use variables. You can use collections, to store data that you need in several places. You can use global variables. Yeah, sorry about. You can use global variables. You can reference this all over your application and use that instead of recalculating values over again. So we can optimize your search and filtering. That's boils down to delegation and structuring your filter queries properly. Limit data retrieval. So that is also in tune with what I said earlier on about reducing the data which are fetching into your application at a go. Fetch just limited data that the user wants to see because ideally, if you look at it, yeah, if you have probably 1,500, let's say you have 7,000 records within your database, a user is not expected to interact with the 7,000 records. He probably just wants to interact with just 5 or 7 or so. So you don't need the rest of the data. You just need the user to see what he needs to see within the database. So you give him the functionality to actually drill down to what he needs to see. So you have the concurrent function. So basically now, when you're running formulas within your Power App, right, the formulas run sequentially. So when let's say I want to perform a couple of functions, right? I want to perform probably like 5 functions, and I've outlined them one after the other. So it's good to run sequentially, to run one after the other. But in order to increase the performance of your filter queries, what you can do is introduce a concurrent function. A concurrent function allows you to run several functions at the same time within the concurrent function. So you specify a concurrent function, then you outline the different functions you want to run. So within the concurrent function, and they will run parallel. That is, all of them will run at the same time. But you have to be careful. So make sure that the functions you are running are not dependent. You understand? Let's say you are setting a variable now, then you are setting probably a variable for you are setting a variable two, then you are setting another variable to be the result of the first variable you set plus one. You see that the other one is dependent on the first one, so you cannot do such a action. So you have to make sure that the functions you are specifying within a concurrent function are not dependent. So also we can reduce control dependencies. So basically when you are writing formulas, right, you will have encounter scenarios in which probably we have a particular control, right, and we want to toggle on the visibility of that control based on the value that we have in a different control, right. So basically that is control dependency. But it can be the visibility. It can also be the value within the control as well. You can also want to toggle the options you have within a drop down based on what we have in a different drop down or based on the value we have in text box. These are dependencies between controls. So you try as much as possible to reduce that because every time you change the value, we are doing some sort of calculation, and that has some, that impacts the app performance in a way. And when we have a lot of this, it can have a significant impact on your app performance. So you just try as much as possible to reduce control dependencies within your application. So now we move on to the next point, which is actually the app performance optimization. In general, how do we improve the performance of our applications? So yeah, we have data caching, right? So data caching is storing of data locally in your app to reduce the need for repeated data calls. So basically, we are improving the app performance, we are improving the load time, because now we don't need to make another additional call for that data. So basically, we are improving our performance by reducing the times you need to make calls. So how can we do this? We can do this by storing data in local variables. We can storing data in collections, so, and what are the advantages of actually catching data within your application? So like I said, reduce load time. Catch data can be quickly accessed. It's within your application already. You don't need to make any calls. You just pick it up. Like, simple as that. So we have improved performance, reduce network traffic because you are not making an additional API call. So there's no network, there's no interaction with your database to pull that data. So we have offline access. So if we, let's say for some reason, as you are using the application, you have a network issue or cut, or probably you are using your application offline, that data that you retrieve within your application will still be available for you to use within the application. Okay, so another app optimization technique, you can another app optimization tip is loading lazy techniques. Lazy loading technique. So what this actually implies is I've actually stated it before. So basically, is when you say something is lazy, it means you probably have some work to do, but you're pushing it until later before you do the work. So basically, it's still the same thing. We have a lot of data that we want to use within our application, but rather than bring all the data in, we are being lazy about it. We bring in just a few amount of data, right? Then based on the needs, if the user needs to see more data, then you bring more data into the application, or even better, you bring specifically the data the user needs to see into the application based on filter parameters that the user will set based on what he wants to see. So you can put in controls, you can put in text boxes, drop downs, date filter controls, date time controls that you can use to filter down the data to see just exactly what the user needs to see, right? So, and also when you're using lazy loading technique, sorry, the names. So when you're using this, right, you have to, when you are loading the new data, always try to put in a visual feedback to inform the user that you are fetching additional data. You have like 100 records in your table, but you are fetching more. So probably put something like a loading spinner, right, to inform the user that additional data is being fetched into the system at the moment. So you put something like a visual feedback, right, to just inform and let the user understand that okay, something is being done, some additional data is being loaded. So optimizing another optimization tip for your app in general is optimizing your screen navigation. So it's very important. Users need to be able to use your app easy, to be able to migrate, to be able to navigate from one screen to the other. Your controls, your navigation controls should not be hidden. They should not be vague. They should be well placed. They should reference, and they should be well placed, and they should imply, there should be, how will I put it? You shouldn't have to guess that okay, this is the back button, this is the button that takes me home. It should be well structured and well labeled. Yes, I think that's what I'm looking for. It should be well labeled so that users can interact and can move without any help. They don't need to be assisted to use your application. The application should be seamless when users are using the application. So I'll move on to the next, which is actually the user interface optimization. Speaking about the user interface optimization, we have to optimize the control that we have within our application for performance. So, like I said, you have to minimize the controls, use as little controls as possible. It is going to reduce load time. It's also going to improve responsiveness. So, variables and collections. Use your variables and collections for catch data, right? Reduce dependencies between your controls. And also, importantly, this I've not spoken about, use reusable components. So in Power Apps, you have something called components. So you can create a component library, right? You can share it, and users, you and your co-workers or your co-developers, you can leverage these components to build your apps more rapidly. And this is going to ensure standardization within your applications because you're using these components which are similar and are going to be the same across your applications. So there's going to be some level of how will I put it? Some level of standardization, some level of uniqueness, or yes, between in all the apps that are being built because you're using these reusable components which are alike. So you can create reusable components that will reduce, that will increase standardization, right? People can, based on an application that users have used and uh, they're already accustomed to how that application works, right? So when they see a similar feature in a different application, they will not find it difficult to interact and understand how the application works. So basically,
Okay, sorry to cut you in, Ibrahim. We have 10 minutes more,
oh,
so like to like probably get into question and answer session. Um,
okay.
let's just give you like 2 more minutes to round up, then you can get into question and answers.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to do a roundup with this session. So I have uh, I'll use this session for my last. So this is about improving accessibility and usability for your applications because this is very important when it comes to people with disabilities using your application. You have to create your application in such a way that it is also accessible to people with disabilities, be it sight or hearing. They have to be able to use your application. So I'll just go through this real quick. So basically, your color contrast and readability, you have to ensure that the color contrast between the text and the background is good, right? So that users with sight disabilities can be able to read the information you have within your application. You understand? So avoid relying on color alone. So basically, everything in your application, you have to label everything right. You understand? So that users with disabilities can identify a component and parts of your application. So text alternatives. So when you have images, right? When you have images within your application, always try to provide text alternatives for your images so that users with sight disabilities that cannot, you understand, they can, when they're using screen readers can read the alternative text for these images and they can have an understanding of what's going on in that part. So also clear labels and instructions. So within your application, don't use big instructions, or big label names. So we can, in instances where we have a form, you just have it button down there that says submit. It's kind of form, it's kind of big. So you can put something, or you have something that just says save. You can just say like um, submit request form. Just put something that is very clear, something that is, you understand, that speaks to the task that that button or that label speaks to. So basically, we also have uh, testing. We have focus indicators. So in this regards, we should implement visible focus indicators for all interactive elements. So what this implies is that when you are moving your cursor on your screen, right, you should have focus elements. Not just that, when you interact with a particular element or a particular control, you should have a focus property so that you know that at this point in time, this is the particular control I am interacting with. You understand? You click on it, then it has a focus. In most times in Power Apps, it's probably like an increased border, increased border size. So when you click on a control, you see that the border will get thicker. So you know that okay, this particular control that I am clicking on at the particular moment, right? So basically, we also have keyboard navigation. So basically, you have to ensure that all interactive elements are accessible via keyboard, right? So let's say you are typing in keyboard. I don't know if you've noticed this particular feature in your apps before, where you are typing in a particular text box, but you want to move on to the next. You can actually tap on your tab key to actually move to the next adjacent or the next text box that you have on the page. So you have to make sure that you can use your keyboard to navigate the interactive elements within your application, right? So I guess this brings, let me just close it here and I would like to take your questions. Yeah, thank you.
All right. I don't know if you have any question. I haven't seen any question in the chat box yet. No questions, but me, I have questions anyways.
All right.
Okay, so for a beginner, Power Aspects Practice and Optimization, they would feel like we have probably been saying a lot of things that are good, but they will not be able to translate that into action. So, could you like probably uh, give some examples of Power Apps functions that could actually help with optimization? So, because we've been saying stuff like collect, someone that is a beginner will probably not understand what you mean by collect. Sure. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Okay. So
Yeah.
basically, I stated a particular function that can help in optimization. I guess that's the only one. But I also state some other ones. So I stated the
Yeah.
concurrent. So I stated
Yeah.
the concurrent.
Correct.
So yes. So basically, depending on the database that you are leveraging, you also have a couple of delegable functions, right? That you can use within your applications, and ones that you can use functions like the filter function. When you can use a filter function to filter your database, but also within your filter function, I stated something about combining delegable queries to achieve to drill deep into your data. So when you're using your filter functions, right, you can also combine some other queries or some other functions within the filter function. So basically
Okay.
to achieve what, yes, so basically we can use some, I don't think these are functions, but they are basically like, how will I put it? I've forgotten the word for it. So that we can use to combine conditions together within your filter function. So we have the and, we have the or, but, so
We
you
have a
can say
clear
that,
collect.
yes. So you can say that you want to filter this particular data source, right? To get this particular data source to get where this particular column is equal to this, or this particular column is equal to this. But you see, now that is a delegable query. But also in the same vein, you can say that you want to filter that data source where this is not equal to something. That is not a delegable query. You understand? So even within your filter, you can still perform some queries that are delegable and some that are not delegable, depending on what you are combining within your filter query. You understand? So for that, you have to get, probably I can share with the document, some I think we have a documentation for this on Microsoft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
So thank
documentation for this, so I can share that as well.
yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you everyone for joining us. So essentially we've been able to talk about power aspects, practice and optimization. In case you're looking into stuffs like making your app, optimizing your app, you could probably look at stuffs like some notable power functions that essentially collects your database that you're referring to. It kind of collects it and doesn't and like just keeps it instead of, and there's also clear collect, which is probably what people use the most because clear collect is easier. It kind of collects that collects probably your database, and then probably when you move to a screen, it updates that collection. Probably something has changed before, but because they're using collect in regards to using collect, that just essentially just collect everything at once, and even if a change occurs, you will probably not know yet. So using all those types of functions, I think you have a question. Using all those type of functions can essentially help to optimize your app, make it seamless for the end users. Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for joining this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session.
Bye.
And again, if you probably have not caught up with all the other sessions we've probably taken up, this recording is available on YouTube. You can just scroll to the playlist and look at the other sessions that we had previously. Again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out to join, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.